Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Hawaiian classics with a shot at the Chinese congee or rice porridge, inspired by the elaborately fancy and delicious version found at Koko Head Cafe in Honolulu, Oahu. For those unfamiliar, a Chinese congee at its core is a very simple concept. It is essentially long grain or jasmine rice that has been cooked with 2 or 3 times more water than you would typically find in your more standard rice recipes, resulting in a more porridgy and watered down texture. Most typically in Chinese cuisine, you might see this eaten as a very simple breakfast, maybe with some soy sauce, furikake, dried rousong, or even just on its own. Of course, since it is such a simple concept, there are also similar parallels in many other Asian cultures as well, like the Korean juk, the Japanese okayu, the Taiwanese xifan, which is how I have always known it. The variations are truly endless. For our version today, however, we're going to be taking a look at the Koko Head Cafe interpretation of a Hawaiian-inspired congee, which makes use of some Hawaiian Portuguese sausage, poached egg, and a crispy cinnamon bacon crouton tossed in bacon fat. And yes, I know if that sounds like it is incredibly rich, delicious, and heart attack inducing, it must mean that we are once again back in the world of Hawaiian cuisine. Finally, we'll be rounding this all out with my personal 2 favorite ingredients, which is a little bit of sharp white cheddar cheese and maple syrup for a sweet and savory twist. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so diving right in, we're starting off here with the 3 aromatic ingredients that I firmly believe belong in pretty much any savory Chinese or Taiwanese recipe for their umami driving qualities. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, and the whites of 3 green onions sliced thinly. Then we're taking these reserved greens, slicing them up thinly on a bias, and setting these aside for our finishing garnish later on. Over on the stove, we're getting started on our congee or xifan juk, I don't know. Anyway, I'm heating up our wok as hot as possible, then adding just a single tablespoon of peanut oil and doing my very best to long yao with such a small amount of oil. Then we're dropping in our aromatics. Here's our garlic, ginger, and the whites of our green onions going in, which we're blooming for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant. Then next, I'm following this up with a whopping 7 cups of chicken stock, then bringing my fire down to a simmer, adding in a single cup of rice and letting this simmer for 30 minutes. Now, if you've got some leftover cooked rice sitting around, you can also just toss this in as well. Either way, both or either of these will yield the same results since we're just going for porridge here anyway. 30 minutes later, our rice should have reduced to this wonderful porridge texture, then we're removing from heat immediately. Now, as I mentioned before, a more traditional congee or xifan is served very simply, so I thought I'd run through some of my favorite interpretations here first, for everyone here looking for quick Monday morning breakfast ideas. First up is my simplest interpretation. This is a touch each of soy sauce and sesame oil to start, followed by a shake of dried furikake or seaweed, and we have a breakfast that I legitimately eat all the time. It's simple, quick, tasty, and really easy to throw together if you've got some leftover rice from the night before. This took me about as long as it takes to make a bowl of oatmeal, with the added benefit that it doesn't taste like cardboard. Next up, here's a slightly fancier version for you. This is a little bit of soy sauce on top again to start, followed by a pinch of dried rousong or pork floss, then followed by what I have literally only ever seen described as fried gluten. You can find this stuff in the canned goods aisle of most Chinese grocery stores, and I believe would be fairly similar to the meat substitute known as seitan. In any case, it's slightly sweet and chewy and goes great on top of rice porridge. I personally remember eating this a lot on school day mornings when there were no more Eggos left, but there was a lot of leftover rice from dinner the night before, and we always had these other ingredients in the pantry on hand too. Okay, so back to our Koko Head version of congee, which is thankfully much more elaborate, otherwise this wouldn't be much of a recipe video. We're getting to our croutons here first. I'm large dicing half a loaf of this leftover rosemary sea salt sourdough from Upper Crust Baking. A quick shout out to their wonderful crew at the Hayward Farmers Market, where they used to be our pop-up's neighbor. In any case, by requirement, croutons do need to be made with leftover bread so that the moisture has already been drawn out, otherwise our croutons will turn out soggy. Ours is about 4 days old here, I think. Next up, here's my Hawaiian Portuguese sausage, which I'm small dicing and setting aside. Now, I picked this up in Oahu, where you'll find this in pretty much every Foodland and grocery store on the island. If you're not in Hawaii, however, you may have better luck tracking down the Portuguese linguiça at your local butcher, which is essentially the same thing by a different name. Next up is 4 strips of thick cut bacon, which I'm very intentionally using the pieces with the most of this fatty white portion here as possible, since it is going to be the main ingredient in our croutons later on. I'm similarly large dicing this and setting it aside. Then last up is about a 1/4 cup or 1 ounce worth of our extra sharp white cheddar, which I'm shredding and setting aside for our congee later on as well. Over on the stove, I've got my wok heating up as hot as possible. Then I'm adding just 2 tablespoons of peanut oil to the wok, and as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then next, I'm starting off with my Portuguese sausage here, which I'm sauteing for about 2 minutes until golden brown. These should shed off a decent amount of fat on their own as they cook, which is why we're going so light on the oil here. Next, I'm setting our sausage aside, wiping down my wok, and dropping my bacon in cold so that we may render out our fats into a liquid form here. I'm adding a 1/4 cup of water to get things going, then starting things out on medium-low heat and gradually raising the heat over the course of about 5 minutes until our bacon yields this wonderful liquid gold. Then next, I'm removing my bacon solids and setting these aside for a moment while we head back over to our croutons, which I have waiting in my largest mixing bowl. Then I'm combining this with my bacon fat, followed by a teaspoon of cinnamon, and giving this all a quick toss to combine until our croutons are thoroughly coated. Then I'm adding this to a baking sheet and popping it into a 350-degree F oven for 15 minutes until crispy. Back over on the stove, I've got a pot of boiling water rolling, and we're getting to the final element that I have absolutely been dreading because I'm positive that I'm going to f it up, which is our poached egg. I'm using a spoon to give our water a good swirl, which is going to help hold our egg whites together when we drop in our egg, and that looks just awful. Okay, so one more time. I've got a fresher carton of eggs this time, then I'm cracking it into a fine mesh sieve to allow some of those wispy bits of our egg white to come off here first. Then I'm dropping it into a pot of swirling water, and I'll take it. Back over on the cutting board, I'm adding my congee to a bowl, then folding in my cheddar cheese here to start, followed by my bacon solids, then our Portuguese sausage, croutons, and poached egg. Then next, I'm garnishing this with a pinch each of white and black sesame seeds, followed by the greens of my green onions, and finally, last but not least, just a touch of maple syrup on top, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I've been eating congee or xifan for pretty much all of my life, and I do mean that literally because I'm pretty sure that I used to eat this when I was a baby too. To be absolutely honest, it never even occurred to me to try and do anything more with rice porridge outside of simple and quick breakfast meals. That said though, I do love the addition of all of these really rich and flavorful elements because congee in itself doesn't actually taste like much, so this gives us a lot of room to dress the dish up quite a bit. Our crispy croutons add a nice textural balance to the soft and porridgey quality of the congee, and I thought they were also a really creative use of that rendered bacon fat. Then I think my favorite part of this dish is the Portuguese sausage, which is just a really nostalgic flavor for me because it's such an iconic part of Hawaiian cuisine and reminds me of a lot of the breakfasts that I had in Hawaii when I was a kid. Finally, the congee itself is actually quite flavorful, coming from the aromatic veggies and cheddar cheese that we folded into it, and makes for a nice sweet and savory pairing with that maple syrup finish that I'm always a fan of. If you've got some leftover rice and you're looking for some creative Sunday morning breakfast ideas, this is a great one to take a shot at. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to recreating classic Hawaiian dishes where I spent a lot of my childhood. So definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet because there's a lot of these. For the Hawaii locals and visitors, Koko Head Cafe is out in Honolulu in Oahu and is pretty legendary for their Pan-Asian fusion dishes, so definitely stop by if you have the chance. For the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook pop-up is back at Federation Brewing in Oakland every Friday, so swing by and come say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice humans, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
am cross your mind anytime. Do you ever wake up reaching out for me? Do I ever cross your mind?